G'day buddies, Jackaroo Turo here. And on this channel I talk about Australian Aborigines, their languages, cultures, history, and so on. And in this video about Australian Aboriginal kinship, I'd like to introduce the so-called prototypical Kariera system of social organization, as Alfred Radcliffe Brown called it in this article from 1913, Three Tribes of Western Australia, where he introduces the Kariera tribe, or Kariera, which is the Aboriginal pronunciation, the Kariera tribe, and two neighboring tribes, Ngaruma and Mardudhonera. Mardudhonera, that's almost a tongue twister, actually. Yes, so in this system, society is divided into four sections. And everyone belongs to one of these four sections. The names of the sections vary somewhat in different regions, and therefore Radcliffe Brown called them sections A, B, C, and D. And in Kariera, these here are the names of the sections. So we have Panaga, which is the one I was adopted into. The second one is called Porung in some sources, and Porungo in others. I am used to Porungo, so I'm going to go with that. We have Karimara, and Paljeri. And in this system, everyone is a relative, a real or classified one. So everyone is called by a kinship term. People do keep track of who is a real relative and who is a classified one, of course. Usually in the languages of the tribes that have the Kariera system of social organization, there are different terms for real relatives and those that are merely classified as relatives. You have obligations to your real relatives, not necessarily to the classified ones. So, how does this work? Well, marriages take place here and here. So a Panaga person needs to marry a Porungo person. A Karimara person needs to marry a Paljeri person. And children move this way. And here we have what McConville, in the 2018 book that I mentioned in the previous video, what McConville calls covert matrimoieties. And what is that? Well, in the patrimoiety system, which moiety a person belongs to depends on the moiety of the father. In the matrimoiety system, it depends on the moiety of the mother. And perhaps two matrimoiety systems meshed here originally to create the prototypical Kariera system, because which section a person belongs to depends on the section of that person's mother. So if we take as an example that a person has a Panaga father and a Porungo mother, then that person will be Paljeri, him or herself. So here children move this way and they move in these directions. there. In this system, parallel cousins and cross cousins are distinguished, which is important and relevant to do this distinction in small groups. Earlier in history, at some point, it has been figured out that you don't want parallel cousins to have kids with each other, because that's when you get unpleasant genetic disorders. So what are parallel cousins? Well, that is what we have here. We have a person here, ego, who has a father and a mother, someone who contributed the sperm at least, and someone who contributed the egg. And parallel cousins then, those that you don't want to have kids with, are your father's brother's children and your mother's sister's children. Those are the ones that should be avoided. In this system, parallel cousins are in fact not cousins, they are siblings, which would seem to be a smart move because most people around the world don't really want to marry siblings. It would seem that through history it has only been the ancient Egyptians that have been the exception to that rule. So think about it. We have a person who is Palieri, because the person's mother is Borongo. So the person's father might have brothers. They are also all here. That means that they take wives from here. And your parallel cousins end up in the same section as this person. But the father and the father's brothers are all fathers in this system. The mother and mother's sisters are all mothers. Hence, parallel cousins are siblings. Cross cousins, on the other hand, do not pose a danger to genetics. People further back in history would of course not have used such terms, but they did understand what was going on. So, in this system, cross cousins end up over here, in the group or section from which you need to take your partner or find a partner. So if we have a father here, his sisters are also here, and that means that their children end up down here. If the mother is here, her brothers are also here. That means that mother's brothers take wives from here, and their children end up down there. Does that mean that people that belong to the Kariera system can and could marry a real cross cousin? Well, here we can see that we need to keep the marriage rules separate from this system of social organization, because as it so happens, among the tribes that use the Kariera system of social organization, marriage rules vary very much. Usually the answer is no. You cannot marry a real cross cousin. It needs to be someone further away, so to speak. But along the coast here in Western Australia, where Kariera or Kariera is found, In this tribe and neighboring tribes, people could marry real cross cousins. And from what I've heard, it was a fairly frequent occurrence. Yes. So, children move this way and this way. Sons move in this direction and in that direction. So, in one generation, we have a man here. His son ends up down here. His son, in turn, is back here again. And so on. So, if this person that we have been talking about is a man, his father is up there. He takes a wife from here. And then his son is Panaga. So we have two sections in alternating generations like that. And as it so happens, this also shows the directions that avoidance relationships go. As I'm sure many people are aware, the relationship between a mother-in-law and her son-in-law can be a complicated one. I know from experience, Australian Aborigines have known this for a long time too. And in different parts of Australia, they have different solutions for this. Here along the coast in Western Australia, we have avoidance relationships here. That means that a man on the one side needs to avoid a woman one generation older than him on the other side. And it goes the other way too. So the woman, the older woman, needs to avoid men one generation younger than them on the other side. Because these women are the younger men's classified mothers-in-law. And when the man marries, one of them becomes his actual mother-in-law, of course. So they should not talk to each other at all. If they need to communicate, they should send an intermediary. And when one such person is close by, there was an avoidance style of the language that should be used. You should not use the normal speech style or genre. There was another speech style to use in such contexts. And interestingly enough, a person's or a young man's father's sisters are his classified mothers-in-law. So they belong among those that should be avoided. So if we have this man here, his father is up there. And of course, so are the father's sisters. Hence, they are classified mothers-in-law. Now, a man and his mother-in-law were only allowed to speak directly once at the wedding ceremony, when the mother-in-law handed over her daughter. Otherwise, they should avoid each other. By the way, that father's sisters should be avoided was perhaps not as big a problem as it might sound, because Aboriginal groups in Australia were patrilocal. That term means that the boys stayed in the groups where they grew up, and different groups exchanged brides for the young men. So father's sisters would not have lived in the same group. as a young man growing up, having to avoid father's sisters. There is more that could be said about this, but I think perhaps this is enough for today. But I will be back, so see you later.